the background of this, over this past weekend, there was a lot of issues in Seattle. So you had the Taylor Swift concert, right? You had the Capitol Hill block parties. You already had this incredible strain on law enforcement trying to deal with these massive events and an influx of people in two different neighborhoods of the city. And on top of that, you already have a police force that's down like 600 officers. So on top of all that, Jason said that he was hearing from his sources that there were officers who called in sick in a semi-coordinated sick-out, which is against the law. It's not allowed, and for good reason. I said, as supportive as I am of police officers, I said when I heard that from Jason that I don't like that because you're playing politics with people's lives. I feel for officers, I do, but you signed up to protect and serve, and a sick out is not doing either of those things. So anyway, Mike Solan, the president of the Seattle Police Guild, he took to Twitter. I was kind of surprised that he kind of semi is confirming this. He posted a long video, but here's just a part of the video that he posted on this situation.
It's a recipe for disaster because not only do we have half of patrol operations call out for Saturday, but we also had 40% of the people not show for special events. And if you don't know what special events is agreements with third-party vendors, such as concerts like Taylor Swift, that approach the city to perform in a venue. And then the city has to either say yes or no. You either get a permit or you don't, and then you have to provide public safety service. And for us, it's the Seattle Police Department per charter and per our contract. So when you have such a dire situation when it comes to staffing, and you're being asked by the city to provide public safety service for special events and or patrol response, folks, we don't have enough cops, and the city is less safe.
Yeah. And look, again, I get it. I feel for the officers. I have been perhaps more supportive of the men and women of the Seattle Police Department than any other member of the media. They do a difficult job. They are subjected to unhinged attacks from politicians who are supposed to be technically their bosses. But I just don't think a sick out is the way to, one, deal with the situation, or two, increase trust among community members and ingratiate them to politicians in the city. So anyway, Mike Solan, we taped this really quick before we came on. He had just a sliver of time, but we invited him on to talk about, he just joined us by phone, but to talk about what happened, what he thinks happened, and also to send a message to city leaders and voters about how to avoid situations like this down the road. Mike Solan, thanks for being here.
My pleasure. Happy to be on.
And so we had heard, I think Jason Rantz first reported it, that this might have been part of the issue this past weekend was a sick out. So you're now confirming that.
Well, what I want to confirm is basically saying that we don't support any kind of sick out. What we do know is that 50% of patrol operations didn't show. And the information we got that it was a sick out, whether or not that was coordinated, I have no idea, nor do I want to know. It's illegal for us to do that. I messaged that to the membership, with the understanding, the backdrop that they're tired and that we've been asked to do way too much with little, and 600 gone, almost 600 gone in 3 years. And the backdrop of 2.7 years working under an expired labor contract with a political climate that still is Seattle, unfortunately, you're going to have people that are just overworked and they're just basically saying enough.
Yeah, and I don't disagree with you on any of that. We'll talk about it in a moment. But on the sick out, it angers me if it's true because you're talking about people's lives and public safety. So just, I know you've messaged it to them, but to message it publicly, what would you say to those officers who would call in sick almost to make a point?
Don't do it. You're exposing the community safety, to your point, Brandi, which I think is the most important piece of this. And then second is those that do show, you're exposing them to dangers. And that's why I was very, very forthcoming and strong hitting with my message to the membership to say, listen, this is illegal, period. And guess what? Guess who's the one being held accountable for that, if it's true? This guy. So it's against federal law. It's against the charter, right? It's against our contract. And they'd be looking at me. So there's no way that we would ever condone anything like that. But I think the overall optics of this, which is truth, is that this is a political problem that can be solved by City Hall. Start supporting your officers, basic, publicly. treat them as human beings that are quality professional police officers. One, it's a no-brainer. The second is respect them and give them a fair competitive labor contract. Because if you keep saying yes to all these special events, which brings money into the city, opens the city back up, I fully support that. The problem is you're asking us to fill all those as well as conduct 911 response, and we just don't have the staffing for it. Then guess what? The community's put at risk. And then the other piece of this is we don't even have enough detectives to handle the caseload. What about the victims?
Yeah.
What about all these cases? So this is a compounding big concern. And it's time that our elected officials get serious and solve this problem, which they have the authority and power to do so.
Yeah, and some of this is long-term stuff. It's going to take years and years to dig the city out of the situation that we're in with public safety. But I've got to ask you, I know we're both really short on time today to do this interview, but there's an election coming up, 7 of 9 Seattle City Council seats. What would you tell to the populace, to voters, about the importance of choosing people who are going to be supportive of the officers that we still have left?
Yeah, I would put it ultimately on them. That's a great point for your last piece of this. My pledge to them, which I covered in this latest podcast I put out, is if my pledge to people that have the ability to vote in this city, usually 20% of the time people show up to vote. That's not good. So the activists fill that void and they definitely get out the vote. So my challenge to the reasonable community out there that do support us overwhelmingly is have a ballot completion party. Grab 10 of your friends, have food, drink, talk about the issues, then complete your ballot. Then they'll grab 10 people. The power is on the community to solve this problem. You have to get engaged. If they don't get engaged, Brandi, it's still status quo and we're in this quagmire. And I really worry about the viability of this city, particularly this police department, as we're already seeing the reason why you and I are having this discussion. It's untenable.
Yeah, it's untenable. Mike Solan, thank you for jumping on with us quick, and thank you for sending a strong message that sickout is not the answer. I don't think it improves public trust in the police department either, so it's important to hear that message coming from you. Thanks for being here.
You bet. Thanks, Brandi.
We all know the danger of this situation as well, and again, you can be supportive of law enforcement, but still recognize that calling in sick when you're not sick, when you're already short-staffed, is literally putting people's lives at risk. And I don't believe that that is the intent of any of them, but I think that's the byproduct of it. And we saw over the weekend the result of, in real time, the result of not having enough police officers out and about. There was a shooting on Capitol Hill, so there had been some... I was told not to call it street racing because technically they weren't street racing, but you know, when they come in and do all the donuts or whatever they call them, and incredibly unsafe environment, but you had this huge, massive crowd form. You know, people are calling the police to show up, and there was now dash cam video of the police showing up. You see this big crowd in front of them where this is happening, and the crowd doesn't care. They're not listening to the officers. In fact, they go up, they're in front of, they're posing for photos at the hood of the police car. Just insanity. I mean, jumping on the hood of the police car, an absolute lack of respect for the rule of law. Now, if there were more officers who were able to be there, would it have been a different situation? I don't know. But we do know that that event ended with 4 people being shot. And so you didn't have enough officers there to be able to break it up in a meaningful way, combined with a complete lack of respect for the rule of law that has been fueled by politicians in this state. Let me repeat that. This has been fueled by politicians in this state. And this is not going to change unless the political environment changes. So if you see that video of a crowd full of young people, banging against a Seattle police cruiser, jumping up on an occupied Seattle police cruiser, refusing demands from police that they break up. That led to a shooting. If you care about that, if that doesn't seem right to you, the only way that changes is if the political environment changes. It only changes by voting for people who won't tolerate behavior like that, who'll speak out about behavior like that, who will support good officers who are doing very difficult work. I mean, gosh, this is just common sense stuff, and it's so disappointing. So no, a sickout isn't the answer. But putting in the same exact people or the same types of politicians who led to this environment, who created this environment in the first place, that ain't the answer either. I know none of you are doing that, but man, we sure need to make sure this show reaches the people who are.